The Cortex Cleavers of Boggnagg. By Matthew Howard Stull, September 2017. Scars on the windshield of time, elongating with the intrepid grey flanks of their beauty, twistingly shivered and narrowed spikes into the still-breathing gulf disintegrate. With ices of cold and stone, withered canopies cascading blood and marrow, for the colony is deep in wisdom at these hours. How best then to illustrate the dawn of our servants, including buttresses of nifty blue bile, forming tropical parallels for the tasting. Beasts without necks in manifold fevers releasing carbons of flesh wheels to the tune of tap dance leopards both with and without sunglasses. And yet, the flowers and potions of poesy furnishing long couches stretched by the sea, seizing eggs and powders of light in the shadowy velvet paste of that star in the center of the magic of the water. Cratered at depths of whole cities, crested throughout of slow-chilled beaching surfaces, then can the quake exceed the froth and the pulsing navigations forever, my child, my son, my daughter, my bank of moons in waiting. Feeling quickness after wingless heels, the mighty and the see-through chambers that now wouldn't seem a droplet on the fingertip? True to do the vermilion jowls envelope the stage in the copse with the howler, or snake-like cobra on venison wafer reclining, most inwardly starkly naked again. This powerful sting gapes amid honey-white streaks in the sky, the too true blue scrape of the tongue on bitches of wild. Forth with the jackal's perfection, jumping twin-volume bounces, collecting the flying silver cards of wicked-eyed magistrates underground. Not to cross paths with the uncanny hour shreddings of that planet, which shouldn't be mentioned but as is always on Boggnagg. Over and again like jabbing skewers into a rat in the corner of stretched thin white silo. Severe desires for blood and ruin infest the hourglass swirl, and we slide the python tongue between the convex cylinders of granite. For even if you haven't, you wouldn't agree more, that there is something really wet clinging to the ceiling of our love boat again. Ashen trollop hisses beseem together why excellent as slim doom commands like butter. And fashions on the Cape now profitable have determined snake pit moon shadows pierce velvet winter madness, where white caps sizzle on a sudden. Make better the toad meets him as well flake and squeal believe the dream becoming caked with fetid manures and burnished bronze scepters of death's cackle carriaging mouldy minds yet tropical in dismay of volition. The violent shaking of 1,000 continents on fire removes the pallid crawl of trillions of hours blended in holographic petrol glazes. Yet, hark, ever in these velocities, and sift the paradigm of the capital, with its bushy tail and its windy eye sockets. She seems a smiler in the dunes today, puffing sails that tasted never just so sweet as these. Kerwin Buckfelper muttered to himself the not the first time that morning. It was a particularly steamy humid pre-noon on the island of Blendore, especially for Boggnagg, whose many diverse climates collide, not voluminously undue to God-encompassing membranes of subtle, natural, healthy divisions. Kerwin was clear about his intentions as he steeped himself in prayer that morning. He asked for guidance from above, probably similarly to the way which Franz Joseph Haydn might have asked the then Catholic Austrian gods for guidance in the Austro-Hungarianese Empire. Loud dust holes, repugnant mouth flappers, and disgusting flesh bags were not permitted anywhere near Mr. Buckfelper's laboratory since a few years ago, when out of naive altruistic weakness, he stupidly allowed underdeveloped moronic imbeciles to linger anywhere near his most intrepid endeavors into science and cosmic brilliance. Taxing thrusts of cruel responsibility plagued the man at simply golden intervals, but you know how it is, when no matter how amazing your ambition, you just simply need to, as a human, take what you must out of taking a shit. Kerwin Buckfelper entered the defecation chamber smoothly and without regret. It wasn't a problem to unload the waste products from the body, as long as there was an ample and entirely sufficient supply of ass-wiping paper substances. You will obviously understand this sentiment, I assume. But what is peculiar about this particular release is that Kerwin, once seated on the throne, reached for a freakishly rare document of rare power and honesty. A novella of powerful humor that cannot be ignored any longer. Absolutely no longer will this subject be ignored by the besieged population of everlasting gorgeous Boggnagg. That's right, for humanoids, he joined his quite normal activity with the most arcane reading material, a novella entitled, The Crystal Whispers by D.F. Huguenot. This book had been written on Earth in the late 19th century under perplexing circumstances. But the important thing to remember about it is that it was completely impossible to understand. I mean entirely indecipherable by any humans or artificial intelligences that might have attempted to make any sense whatsoever of this most enigmatic of texts. Mr. Buckfelper turned to page 81 and began reading. In thence sufficiently Northumbriations have thus considerated out Berry's singular wathbeckenses, de primary volcunt everywhere in whose nature is bag bog beg big bug for that truth window pleasures of that which feathers few fires fathers. Night is wet 34. Now whence hither specs sapphire pulse with which never before. Too long fork in tomb grows not in thing higher mossy stones under this is better and pulses are free behavior that has furnishings increase of retired cedar planks grow heavy. 5 severe whip loop honjong noon 5 lip f.3.1. BPPPP 1.3.7.4.1 in that of her when it can shall has this of how. Price hog width and prembium elastic fashions nape und nozzle. Other. Toucan. Ham. Please / pass the salt. Is in November with what is November has alternate visions, and in nor on can what be seen therefore in all ways which has this is on when there can be what the now is what has been in that but can be where in the on the when the new is not having what it could when it might have of what can be is known. Kerwin Buckfelper relaxed his face and looked forward, letting the book dangle slightly below his knees. Somehow this passage was exhausting and entirely fulfilling at the same time. He never believed he could care enough to expect so little and more than that from anything but a book, be at the same time reading it as when alone in a more perfectly decorated chamber. He placed the book face up vertically against the wall next to the defecation throne, then performed the ass-wiping procedure. When finished he washed his hands assiduously and walked back to the lab. Work on these new exacts was going quite well. The Noramite mines of Blendore had been very much overflowing with new specimens of late, which gave Buckfelper reason to believe that soon he would successfully be able to create plant life on the surface of Boggnagg which would begin to produce Noramite powders. These powders would then transferred, during the process of pollination, to the beehives which were harvested in great abundance 3 to 5 times per year. This Noramite had special psychic crystal formations that had been stunning for science and many more applications in many degrees of exchange between the indigenous cultures of Boggnagg. Many generations before the colonists from Earth arrived on Boggnagg, the ancient beings already living there would hold sacred ceremonies using massive slabs of Noramite. Being that Boggnagg was one of the 11 reshelved planets of the central conglomerations of fifth quadrant quasar pulse nodes, it was easier to feel the unrestrained being light from sun reflectors resonating in far distant galaxies. Truly vernal comparisons have been made by the refuge seekers from Earth ever since their arrival just several decades ago. Kerwin Buckfelper was sure